afternoon. Now we've passed 12 o'clock. I'm Dean Dovolis, DJR Architecture, and I have the honor of being up here with really a lot of esteemed panelists, which really are the leaders in construction and development in the Twin Cities and even nationally, given some of the companies. So this is a good panel, a good group of people. The bad news is you're an hour away from earning your continuing education credits. The good news is, I think this is going to be one of the most interesting panels because it's dealing with change and what's occurring on that. And I just want to set a little background of what's happening. And I did a little research before I come up here about degree of change and rate of change. The period we're going through right now has the greatest amount of change and rate of change since World War II and the Great Depression. That's what's occurring, change society, demographics, economics, all the issues is really coming fast and furious upon us. And we're not done yet. We're just in the hors d'oeuvre stage, what's occurring. So I'm just going to fly through a few examples to give a feel of what's occurring out there. And I'll just hit a few of the highlights. COVID, sounds simple, except we've had COVID, Delta, Omicron, and now we have Deltacron. You say, what the heck's that? That's a new variant out of Cyprus. I combined the two of them. So we're playing fungus whack-a-mole. We have racial equity, which the Twin Cities is the center of the universe on that, for better or for worse, on the basis. Obviously, murdered George Floyd. The riots, which are the second most costly in the United States. Los Angeles, the only one that exceeded it. And all the issues of how to redivide the pie, how to deal with equity, how do we work with it. It's this marketplace to deal with and lead the way or not lead the way on that basis. We have also labor and supply. And you all know about the shortages and supply chains, but I want to give one fun fact. Labor participation rate, which is a measure by the Labor Department, how many people are participating that are eligible to work are participating in the labor force. 55 and over, that number has dropped to 38%. Our most experienced workforce has basically said, I'm done and retired, which makes you sort of give a question, well, I'm still here yapping away. But that's the facts that are occurring on that basis. Economics, inflation hit 7%, the highest since 1982. And lumber, 4% in one day. One of the previous panels talked about lumber behaving like oil. That's even more than oil in terms of a daily rate change and so forth. Demographics, amazing changes on this. And I'll cite a couple stats on this. The US growth rate, and this is a period between June of 20 to July of 21. The US growth rate was the lowest in its history. A country of 300 million grew by only 300,000 people. Never a period of that slow growth rate, just ready to tip in a negative rate. Minnesota grew only by 225 people, meaning less than what's in this room. On that basis, if I take away births in that number, we lost 13,800 people in that 1 year period. Normally we go at 30 to 40,000 people per year. So if everyone thinks we're past labor shortages, you're just getting this up. Speaks for itself. I looked at data, research, continuation. Minneapolis already had 12 carjackings in the first day. A significant part of it, it's being exported to first-ranked suburbs, and it's for those that South River think they're safe. It's starting to be exported into Burnsville. So crime we can get to. When I used to do interviews, he used to ask about Mr. Voles, tell me about your experience and so forth. Now, first question is how I can keep my residents safe. So it's definitely a factor. And then finally, rent control, which Cecil did a very good job on, has actually redlined St. Paul and created a lot of issues with it. Not all change is bad, not all change is good, it's just change. There was such a degree that even Jeff and Todd asked me, said, Dean, with all what's going on, why don't we make the annual summit monthly? You get 12 breakfasts out of the deal and we make a bunch more money. So that sounds like a good deal on that basis. So I just want to give a background of what's occurring. Our panelists are leaders in the industry and have a lot of experience, and it really broke this panel into two structures. One, we're going to have the developers, contractors speak first and give their presentations, then the architects and interior designers. Each one, they have a 3-minute presentations, everyone hears them and their thoughts of how to deal with the change, what they're doing, what they're thinking of, what they're creating, what they're establishing in this marketplace. Then we'll go to the traditional question and answer and ideas on that. So we're going to jump right into this in respect for time. So Anna, I want you to go first, and she's going to really be dealing with the shift of residential experience and its impact on building amenities. So Anna, you have the floor. Thank you.
I thought Cody would go first. He's closest to you.
No,
Put me on the spot.
keep the surprise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Bode. I am a manager of real estate development at the Opus Group, overseeing or helping with our multifamily and industrial projects in the Twin Cities. Since 2018, Opus has delivered just over 1,000 units to the Twin Cities market, with our most recent one being the Vesey North Loop Apartments that came online August of 2020, so a little over, I guess I can say, a year and a half ago, and we just reached stabilization there in the fall. So that was 218 units right along the Mississippi River. Very exciting to see the activity even during the pandemic. So very proud of that one. And then our next project coming up is 250 units in St. Louis Park on Beltline Boulevard. That will be a mixed use project. We'll have 7,500 square feet of retail, and it's also got an affordable component. So 10% of our units will be affordable for 50% AMI. So that's kind of what we have going on at Opus right now. And then what I wanted to focus on today is just this shift or evolution in the resident experience. And it's something that we're all dealing with on the development side, the designing side, something that's impacting our existing buildings and then our future developments as well. So just a few points on the slide that we'll also get into later, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. But for our existing assets, how do you creatively multi-purpose amenities that were previously just used for one objective? For example, the club room is usually your entertaining space. During COVID, and we're still in COVID, so not a lot of entertaining going on, but how could we shift that to be more work from home space, or how can we make it quieter, have different pockets of seating for people to get out of their unit and work, especially because we don't have as many work from home spaces in those existing buildings already. Leading into the next topic, work from anywhere. We want to create a variety of environments. I know I get bored when I'm sitting in one spot for too long. So again, just making those amenities multifunctional. Pets are people too. I think during the pandemic, we saw, or pre-pandemic, I should say, maybe 30% of residents had pets, and Jen Gordon and her panel could probably correct me on this, but I think now we're seeing over 60% of our residents with pets. So how do you make the building pet friendly, and what amenities, cater to having animals in them, especially because it's not good for their well-being to be locked up, and you don't want to have unhappy neighbors if your dog is barking in your unit all day. Lastly, how do we take all that we're learning during the pandemic now and thoughtfully create great resident experiences in our future projects? So again, I think that's one of the questions later, so I don't want to take away from it, but thank you.
Thank you. Now, Cody, you're up. And Cody's going to be discussing impact that changes had on the project types. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Dean. Cody Dietrich, Director of Development at Doran Companies. Here today to talk about our Shady Oak project, specifically for this, but 2021, we just wrapped that up, had a great year. We actually just opened our last project, the Krych out in Tonka Bay, in November and December. It's 2 separate buildings, 86 units. And then we actually closed a project in Northeast Minneapolis on Lowry Avenue here at the end of the year, right before December 31st. So big end of the year. And then we're looking forward to a huge pipeline here in the year of 2022. The project that's up on the screen right now is our Shady Oak project right off of Crosstown Highway 62 in Shady Oak. This was broken ground on in August, and it'll be about 350 units with a minor complexion of that being affordable. The project is expected to deliver in the spring of 2023 as the first phase, and then the fall of 2023 to finish off the full project. So this has been the largest project we've been working on recently. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Tying this into kind of one of the themes of our presentation of the up and coming markets or places that you're seeing active development happen for apartments. This is the Opus Business Park. Over the last 3 years since 2019, there's been over 2,200 apartments proposed or completed in that time frame. So we're seeing a definite expansion in this area due to the Opus station light rail coming through here, as well as all the great employment with Boston Scientific, United Health Group, and Optum. So that's definitely a market to watch as we go forward, and there's more development that continues to occur.
Thank you. Next will be Christian Lawrence, one of the leaders in construction and development in the modular industry, who really brought it in a big way to the Twin Cities. So Christian will be talking about the impact on construction methodology and on modular solving that issue. So Christian, please.
Thanks, Dean. So I'm Christian Lawrence, founder and CEO of Rise Modular. Launched Rise in 2019 to try to change the construction and innovate by delivering faster with higher quality, more environmental sustainability and cost savings. And we've fundamentally not changed the way we've built stick-framed buildings in many decades, and it's starting to change all across the country, and particularly on the West Coast and East Coast. And I wanted to bring that technology here to the Midwest. And so we've now completed 3 projects, and we've got several more in the works. And we're really excited about our technology and our ability to deliver projects faster, and a lot of different benefits. And we're really seeing it catch on both here locally and nationally. There's way more demand than there is capacity in the country, and we're already starting to look at expanding geographically as well. So here you got a picture in the bottom right of our manufacturing line, and there's a plant in the upper right, about 150,000 square foot facility, and we can build about 1 million square feet a year. And geographic reach is, there's enough demand here in the Twin Cities that most of what we're doing is here, but we can go as far as Denver, Dallas, Austin, Nashville. We'll likely have to build additional facilities to really serve those markets because there's enough demand here in the Twin Cities. So we're really excited about the growth of the modular segment and the impact that can have on delivery of multifamily units. We can flip to the next slide. Is there another slide, or is that it? So here's Alvaro. We just delivered this project. Super proud of this project. It's probably one of the largest and most complex wood-framed volumetric modular projects ever built in North America. It's in downtown St. Paul, 192 units, just over 150 modules. And it's pretty small for those in the audience here, but the middle right picture shows the stacking plan. And this is, for the most part, a rectangular building with the triangle end cap. And when people think of modular, they think of a perfect rectangle, and really if you think inside the box, a triangle or a trapezoid can fit within a box. And this project is a perfect example of that with that end cap. So super proud of this project and encourage people to drive by it. And if you flip to the next slide, just briefly touch on. So this is right across the highway on Pentagon Park, and we're breaking ground on this 200 unit project in about a month or two. We're really excited about this project. 5 over 1, pretty typical, tier 1 suburban class A product. And then flip to the next slide, just showing some of our other projects and touching on, an area that I think is going to see a lot of growth. And the top left is our Glenwood project, which Dean and DJR are working on with us. This is in the Bassett Creek Valley, where there's going to be a light rail stop in about a year or two. And there's another 300 plus unit project proposed just to the south of our site. We're right next to the Ladona Brewery and Royal Foundry. And I really think this area, is a logical extension of the metro downtown, and with the light rail stop, we're really excited about this neighborhood. And so, those are some of the various projects that are either under construction or slated for 2022. So really excited. Thanks.
Christian, thank you very much. Now we're going to jump into the influence on buildings by the architects and interior design and the portion of how all these trends are starting to change how we lay out, develop, and amenities they put in apartments. So first we have Neil Reardon, who is the vice president of ESG, and his topic will be how these changes early in the pandemic impacted design and how ESG has responded to them. So Neil, please go ahead.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, first project I have up there is already been up there. It's a project that ESG did with Opus a few years ago, and I wanted to put it on. I think for the same reason you did was, this project was designed and planned before the pandemic, but opened during it. And so it's how did the amenities change as that went, and then what should we be planning for as we still deal with the pandemic going forward here. As projects are being planned and designed, but also what's changing during the construction phase, particularly with amenities. So that's why I wanted to include that. And I think there's another slide here, just maybe showing a few pieces of the interiors. Yeah. So, I guess a couple of the questions, we'll get into it, but a couple of questions I have is, what are those, with hybrid work now becoming commonplace, what are those spaces like? How many of them should there be? Can they be tucked in the dark part of the building, or do they need to have a big exterior window? So these are all questions that we're working through, and I'm sure others are as well. So maybe go to the next one. I included a couple other projects for kind of the discussion. Type 1 construction is still strong. It's still happening in Minneapolis, contrary to maybe, some people think, oh, there's not any downtown projects anymore. The Larking is 350 unit project that's under construction still here. This is the next phase, for those who don't know, of the KA headquarters development near their office. So 350 units, mid-rise to high-rise building, type 1 construction with all of that full amenities package that you would expect in that sizable project. And then lastly, a project that I've been working on for a couple of years now. It's proposed near Washington and Hennepin by the Whole Foods. It would be phase 2 for Harlem Irving from Chicago. This project is a 350 unit project, which would essentially add another 350 units to what they just opened at 270 Hennepin. Again, highly amenitized type 1 floor to ceiling glass there with the window wall design. And a very urban, relationship to the street, retail at first floor, and but fully parked like a downtown project that you would expect, and fully amenitized with really that full floor of amenities that's typical of a type 1 house.
Thank you. Thank you. Get closer to the mic here. Joyce, here. Make sure we get it. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Good.
Joyce is president of and partner of BDH, and Joyce will speak about the change to create more flexible, adaptable spaces, both in micro and larger units. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for letting me join virtually. It's thrown a little bit of a curveball. So I'm quarantining, waiting for a COVID test, which seems to be par for the course. But on the bright side, I get to be doing this in my sweatpants, and everybody else is in your elastic waist real pants. So I'm just happy to be able to join it all. So as Dean said, adapting to change, and I want to make sure we say it that way, right? It's not how have we adapted to change, it's how are we adapting? And we're certainly adapting to change within our own offices. Here I am able to do this from my own home, which is fantastic. We've just seen a rate of change and uncertainty over the past year and a half, and now almost into our start of our third year with the pandemic. So that combined with the other factors within our community, the civil unrest, and now some concerns over crime, it's just a different world that we're entering into. And to be able to determine now what is going to be needed and so pertinent to the people we're building these buildings for in 2-3 years when these projects are delivered is no small feat. So we as a design practice have really embraced continuing to study, really trying to study and understand what people's needs, not only the work from home, but outside of that, just how people within our apartment buildings are going to be comfortable and want to socialize and come together as a community. And all that's in flux. So as a design practice, we're working to turn on a dime and to be able to say out loud, well, this is what we thought was going to happen over the next couple of months, but now we're seeing this emerge. And so let's make some tweaks, let's pivot a little bit, but ultimately to deliver the best apartment project that we can. So a couple of the slides that are up and what Dean was alluding to, speaking to amenities and how to make those multifunctional. Certainly one of the biggest topics is the work from home or work from apartments, work from anywhere. And I think there's still some embracing the thought of how we accommodate that in the apartment buildings, and the thought that it doesn't only need to be large communal spaces where people are working, as the top left and the bottom right-hand photo are showing. It's balancing that communal space with balancing and folding in a few private focus zones within and focus areas, with even some of these work pods and some FF&E solutions like that. And one would say, well, if someone wants to do that, they could certainly do that in their unit. But we all enjoy a varied variety of experiences throughout the day, getting out of our home or getting out of our apartment, especially if we're back like me, quarantine. So just allowing people to have those different options, folding in through some of the core amenities, some of the work from home lounges with the coffee service, the beverage services, great design to it, lots of natural light, group spaces like the conference room, but then finding some other nooks and crannies in the building for Zoom rooms and for those work pod areas, those focus spaces. So then another thing that we're seeing a lot of and embracing is through the pandemic, people learning new hobbies and having a real desire to express their creativity. So that bottom picture on the left-hand side, that's one of the maker spaces that we've been putting into our buildings, which still really multifunctional. Certainly somebody could come down there and use it solo, do some other things. It could be a social space when needed, but it's really meant to give people space to store their art supplies, to bring out the easels or the painting and sketch and create and craft and knit and draw and do it either solo because they just need more space, or do it as a group community. And then one thing we like to always talk about, and that's what we're showing in the top right-hand corner there, is the unique amenity. And that's going to just be something that really speaks to people and is the wow factor. We always talk about the one thing that people remember after they tour a building. Is this the red building? Is this the building that had the whatever? This is a speakeasy with a hidden door that we designed into one of our projects in White Bear Lake. And so just finding that one amenity that sparks interest with your residents and sets you apart from other buildings. If we just pop over to the next slide, then there's a couple images. I'll let it advance here. Give it a second. Thank you. Then, of course, the big wellness component, both wellness with outdoor spaces, wellness inside, but no longer just adding in a yoga and bar studio, right? So Peloton studios, mirror equipment, and not just mirrors, but mirror fitness equipment. All the big flashy names that make people feel like they are getting the most elite experience with wellness in the building. Pools, indoor pools even, in addition to outdoor pools. And that kind of leads me to my next thoughts and trend, so to speak, is wellness, connection to nature, using the outdoor spaces as long as we possibly can. The indoor pool, obviously, with all the wonderful windows and natural light, gives us a lot of opportunity to facilitate wellness and have a connection to the outdoors year round. And then just finding ways to build in as many outdoor amenities as we can. And then allowing those to be used year round with heated pavers and fire pits and all those things. So a lot of change happening, but in the end, bringing forth a lot of innovation and really in allowing us as design professionals to embrace and relate to and study the people that we are building these buildings for, and understand with each building very customized solutions that speak to them and just facilitate a better lifestyle and day-to-day experience for our residents.
Thank you. Nice presentation in your sweatpants. Thank you.
Thank you. I know. I think the sweatpants help. I think next time we all band together and all agree to wear sweats to this. When we're panelists.
Well, Mike, finally, your take up there. Mike's a partner in BKV, and he's going to really talk about the pandemic in terms of changes in amenities, building, inclusive projects, all the issues that are coming with it. So Mike, you have the floor. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Yes, Mike Krych, BKV. I lead the multifamily sector in our practice and the Minneapolis practice side. We're a holistic design firm of architects, engineers, interior and landscape designers, construction specialists, et cetera. We're also a national practice with practice sites in Minneapolis, Chicago, DC, Dallas, and Vietnam. This first slide just is a representation of a lot of projects that we have on the boards that will be breaking ground this spring or early summer. Unless some other major event happens, and we're in the process of that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit related to costs. But these projects do have a lot in common. Most of the majority of them, with the exception of one right now, they're all suburban developments. They're suburban focused, and of 10 of them that we have going, 6 to 7 of them are located directly at transit sites. So transit oriented developments are significant. Being able to have options with whether using a car or being able to use mass transit. 4 of those projects are located on the new Green Line being built today. So I think that's a significant trend that's happening within the Twin Cities, transit-oriented development. One of those, and all of those projects, they're well over 200 units. Several of them are over 400 units. So the size of these projects is large and significant as well, being located at these transit sites. The last item, one of the buildings, the middle left, it's under construction, and we're going to be hopefully beginning the second phase shortly in a couple of months, but it's the Duffy building, Duffy Lofts, and it's a conversion project. Again, I think we probably shouldn't take that lightly, that's one of the options for us, alternatives to new construction, to be honest. With the pandemic, the pandemic has completely flipped how we work and play and live on our heads. And working from home for quite some time has changed, and it's affecting how we work, how we play, how we interact, and it's affected our commercial market. So there are plenty of office spaces that are vacant and empty right now. They do have leases in place, but the idea of conversion to other uses, and with a housing shortage, that might be a significant area for utilizing existing infrastructure, which creates a green solution, keeping existing infrastructure and using it in a different way. I think could be a big deal moving into the future. If we can go to the next slide, please. I hope it's in here. So you probably all can't see this, but again, as Dean started off with, we're not dealing with just one significant impactful event. We're dealing with 4, 5, 6 of them. This just shows 4 of them, but climate change, it is facing us, it's here. We need to be doing something about it. The pandemic has been ongoing, again, affecting how we work and live. Inflation is a big issue right now, material shortages. So just to pick a couple, a couple of things. Internally, I think we're all dealing with, how do we salvage how we work? It's very different for us designers who collaborate a lot. I think it affects us in that it's not the same as having to be on a Zoom meeting. To be in person and collaborate does affect our culture. And so figuring out how we find that balance and maintain our culture and not just be a laptop company is, I think, really important for how we work and interact. the idea of costs. These are extreme right now. On any given project, I think we all face VE issues, and maybe Christian, you're the one that maybe has best control over that right now, but the rest of us, we have VE discussions all the time. You know, it wouldn't be uncommon to have a project that's pricing in $2 million over budget on a 30 million or 35 million or $40 million project. Well, in today's world and all those previous projects I had, it might be 2 times that, 3 times that, maybe even 4 times that. So it's really forcing us to really put our creative hats on, think about different ways to do things. It's jeopardizing certain projects, as we've all experienced. So those are some of the things that I think about. We'll certainly talk in more detail. So I'll turn it back to you, Dean.
Thank you, Mike. I feel your pain. Rule of this deal: ask questions anytime from now on. You heard the overall presentation. We have some set questions, but if you have questions and you wish to ask at this point, please do. This is meant to be conversational. So you have something you disagree with, hate, something we missed, raise your hand. We'll take you in right now and go through it. So I just want to make sure that's number 2. Number 2, Jeff, you be kind enough and give me the 5-minute warning because I didn't bring a watch up here. So I don't keep people too long. Or thanks, Todd. So when you say 5 minutes to noon or 1, we're done. Let you guys go and collect your credits on that basis. So anytime interrupt, anytime ask questions, please. But being moderator, I get to ask the first question before I get to the others that people have suggested. And the one I'm going to ask is, if we're doing this presentation a year from now, you'll probably have a better moderator, but you'll still be the same panelist. What will be the topic you'll be talking about a year from now? What will be the number one thing you'll be presenting to the group, given everything that's happening, what you think is going to happen? I want you all to answer it. It's a surprise question because this is not one that was on our list, but I think it's a good one because it starts to think what's past, but how are you going to react to what you think is going to happen in the future? Anyone can jump in first, but I'd like everyone to answer it or debate it if they wish. So whoever wants to start, please go ahead.
I'll go first, I guess. So the first thing will be how great 22 is going to be. Very bullish on the future here. I think the outlook over the next year is going to be heavily on regulation and how cities change from affordable requirements, inclusionary zoning. And then I think the other thing that's coming our way is really going to be along the sustainability. And you're starting to see cities like St. Paul with their BA3 requirements and 2030 requirements. So I think that's going to be the next thing over the next year is how regulation keeps changing. But I think the apartment industry is going to keep moving forward with plenty of capital out there to chase it and lots of eager developers to get going.
Thank you.
I would echo what Cody says and also just say that we'll probably be talking about a lot of the same topics today. Apartment development takes a couple of years to finally reap the benefits. So same topics as Cody. I also think affordability will continue to be an issue that needs to be solved, and working with municipalities and figuring out how to deliver more affordable units. Hopefully we won't be talking too much about more rent control measures, but that's what I think. Hopefully a return in the CBD as well.
Thank you.
I'll go here. I will say we're busier than we've ever been. It's actually crazy. and we're having to deliver things faster than ever as well. So we're trying to figure that out. But I'm hoping we're having a great conference next year. I am hoping that we have more discussions about sustainability and what we're building and building better, building for the future in thoughtful ways. And I hope we're here celebrating our downtowns getting back to life in the way they're supposed to work and operate. It's a big economic engine for this region, and we do need our downtowns to come back and people working and living and playing there. So I hope we're talking about that.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Mike, but I think downtown is just really important. I think there's certainly been a trend to the suburban component here recently with just more development happening in suburbs, as you noted in your slides there. But I think we're going to be talking about constraints still. You outlined like 5 of them, and then we've talked about a couple others, but I think it's like all 7 or 10 of those constraints that are going to bear on us on the design teams and the development teams to come up with more creative solutions to narrow the gap at the time of value engineering, right? To get to where we need to be. I mean, the biggest one right now is inflation for sure. So hopefully we're not talking about that next year, I guess, but we probably will be. And I think maybe we'll be talking about the impact, just like today, we're talking about the impact COVID had on these buildings. Next year, we're probably talking about the impact that 7% inflation had on delivering a building next year, right? So that's my answer. Chris probably got way different.
I'd echo a lot of the same, but I think affordability will continue to be, the most pressing issue in housing, both locally and nationally. Construction costs, while, our technology can help mitigate that to a certain extent, we still use building materials, we still use labor, and both are getting more expensive. And I don't see those trends reversing anytime soon. And even if inflation is transitory, wage growth is not matching that. And so we're going to continue to have a housing shortage. And, a friend of mine told me that, if you think about a 200 unit building getting built, it seems like a big project. It's only 200 homes though. And, 10 of them is only 2,000 homes. And so, we're going to continue to have a housing shortage, and, we're all so busy because there's such great need, and there's a need at all various price points of housing, but affordability is going to, be a big topic going forward. And hopefully, returning to downtowns, and hopefully there's some, correction on policy that, incentivizes additional supply rather than disincentivizes it. And I'm bullish on Minneapolis and St. Paul, in the long term. So hopefully we'll be talking about that.
Joyce?
Yes, great question and a curveball, another curveball for me in the last couple of days. I like Mike's approach. What do I hope we're going to be talking about? To take it even one step farther, I agree, sustainability, affordable housing. I hope we are just talking about and really focused on how we can deliver apartment buildings that help people, whether that be in the affordable category, whether that be in sustainability. I really want to open that conversation up further from sustainability to healthy buildings. What can we do even more to build a healthy building that helps the people in it, that makes their life better? What I think we'll be talking about, to just add on to that, I think we'll still be talking about inflation, supply shortage, is it still appliances? Is it lumber? Is it who knows what? And then I certainly think we'll still be talking about the urban, suburban. I agree. I hope, the urban core comes back. We are seeing a couple projects there, but not truly in downtown, more on the cusp, the edge of Minneapolis. And then I just hope we're talking about how great 2022 was, for sure. And all the wonderful projects that we delivered.
Thank you. I got one question that came out of this, and there was a word hope. Everyone said, hope the downtown cores recover. What needs specifically to be done to allow that to happen? Because everyone says the word hope, and that's always a nice statement, but what has to happen? In your background as developers, architects, real estate, that makes that hope a reality. So I don't want to jump in on that because I hear that over and over again. We hope this will happen. We hope that will happen. But no one really spells out, this is what we need to make it happen. And so I really want to dive into that because that's a response I've heard over, but no one ever puts answers, whether right or wrong. I like to have that sort of put on the table and see what your thoughts are on that. And anything scheme, good or bad.
I'll grab the low hanging fruit on this one. So I think the biggest item is just traffic and crime. So it's getting people back downtown so you can have eyes on the streets and being able to watch what's going on, but also drive traffic into the restaurants and get them back up and running. I know there's been a few new ordinances over the last week and a half or so regarding COVID, which are gonna make it tougher for the CBDs to recover, but I think if we can get those people back there, that all of a sudden drive more traffic to the restaurants and everything, which will create more nightlife, which will create more eyes on the street and help with some of the crime concerns some people have and investing down in the communities and also living in those communities.
Any other thoughts, comments?
I would just,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's so
Go.
hard to be
No,
virtually.
go ahead,
I mean,
go ahead.
But I was just gonna say, Cody, I totally agree. And employers coming or employees coming back. That for a lot of large employers has been pushed and pushed and pushed. So to your point, having eyes and people there with employees coming back to the CBD will be huge.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
it's okay. Just said differently, employers just need to be confident that their employees will be safe in both physical and health and mentally. So I think a lot of measures on that front, and basically the same thing you said, just said a little differently. We need confidence in the downtown.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity. So I've lived and worked downtown most of my adult life in Minneapolis, and it's not just that the employers come back. Of course, that's important, but it's how we do it. You know, I think what you allude to is it safe? What's the experience like downtown? There are parts of downtown with, I think people love the experience, but there are parts that people do not. And I think this is an opportunity to change it. There's probably less traffic with the hybrid work from home model, vehicular traffic, I should say. So that's an opportunity, right? To redefine what our streets feel and look like. So I would say, you know, this isn't the topic necessarily for this panel, but that's our opportunity to reshape downtown as we come out of this. It's a constraint to not have people there, but it's a total opportunity to rethink the experiential aspect of going downtown for all different types of users, whether it's like me or live there, work there, or if you just work there, or if you don't do either and then you come once a month, you know, that's a totally different experience. That's about perception. So it's a tremendous opportunity, I think. Hope's not a strategy, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm driving at. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? And again, anyone has comments?
I'd just add to that,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a big believer, you know, in the downtown cores. You know, I live downtown Minneapolis. I've lived there, you know, my whole career, and you know, I feel safe downtown. And it's, you know, a problem of perception as much as anything else. You know, and there's certainly crime and safety concerns, but you know, certain statistics on different crimes, we're actually down in certain areas. But the perception is not, you know, aligned with that. And young people still want to live downtown. You know, nothing wrong with Hopkins, but I don't know why, if I'm my age, I want to live in Hopkins. You know, I don't. I want to be, you know, downtown by bars and restaurants. And so, you know, it's definitely important to build suburban product, and there's definitely a market for it. We're developing in the suburbs, but, you know, also, you know, developing in Minneapolis, and we'll continue to do so. And, you know, ultimately, you know, people are going to want to live downtown, and there is the political will to correct things and to, you know, have a safe, livable city. But, you know, I'm a big believer that, you know, 5-10 years from now, Minneapolis will be, you know, more vibrant than it is today, and people will continue to want to live there.
Thank you. No, go ahead.
Can I add one more thing? So I would say that some of the neighborhoods in downtown, like North Loop and the Mill District, are actually very vibrant right now and have returned to almost pre-pandemic levels. I think the key attribute to that is because there is housing in those neighborhoods that is driving people to have different things and experiences in those neighborhoods versus the office setting where there are nobody at night, and some of the restaurants have, because of other reasons, decided to close at night. So if we can start developing more in that core and get some more housing in that area, that might also increase the traffic there.
Just to add on to that, I think that's the key is, you know, a mixture of uses, and the reason why North Loop and other neighborhoods have that success is because they're so mixed. There's a very good balance of workers, services, restaurants, people who live there 24/7. Those neighborhoods are still very successful. It's the areas where it's more confined to just office space, where there's lack of people. And so we need people. And so the idea of, and I think this is going to play out again, how, again, we had such a dichotomy of always going into work and then a total 180-degree shift to everybody working at home. So what is the future way we look? And it's somewhere in between. And so what does that look like for infrastructure? And, that's the idea of needing more people. We have a housing shortage. Not every office building is going to be utilized the way it should be 100%. What does that look like, and how can we evolve our city to what you were alluding to? Is I think there's an opportunity there to enrich and reinvent ourselves.
Anyone else? There was a good point there, and this is a study that was made. They made a study of downtown, and the study was based on a ratio of residents to restaurants. And they studied the core, they studied North Loop and the core. The North Loop had a ratio of 5 residents per restaurant. The downtown core had a ratio of 1:1. And they studied the effect of the pandemic on that ratio, where they discovered the North Loop survived COVID relatively unscathed because of that 5-to-1 ratio, to the points the panelists are making. Downtown, the restaurants failed at a high rate because there wasn't enough residents to sustain them through the dearth of office workers. So their statement actually was proven by a study that was recently completed about proper mix of ratio in a pandemic era. So there's a basis of that. Taking off of that question, I really want this guys talking about design and buildings of the future and what you're going to do in the future, because there's a whole host of issues, and you guys and gals touched on them in terms of security, work from home, unit size, because we can't really just keep delivering the same building. There's been a massive change in type apartments. You think about it, when we used to do apartments, they're all 3-story walk-ups, mixer of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms and a bell curve, and that's what they did. Markets started fragmented into micros, macros, luxury, this, forth, and that's continuing. So I want you as developers, architects, interior designers speculate, where are we heading to meet the marketplace, meet the situation, meet the pandemic, the issues of security, equity, all that. What's next on the agenda? And you start touching on presentations, I want everyone to please elaborate on that.
I think the designer should go first on this one.
I'll jump in first real quick. And I think Joyce and Anna actually went into some depth on this, but, and I think all of us designers have been doing this for a long time. And I remember the first lifetime living project we did was it was 22 years ago. It was Heritage Landing, and that project had a lot of amenities. It was the first living work play type of facility in the Twin Cities. And even then, and so we had a lot of amenities. What's evolved, which these two had alluded to, is all of these spaces, whether it's the amenity spaces or the units, have to have, in my opinion, ultimate flexibility. And we've been designing for flexibility, but the pandemic brought that quickly to light that it's really needed. So any space that we design should be thought of as multi-use, whether one person uses it or 50 people are in it, that it can serve and function and perform well at any capacity and have that flexibility within the units as well. It's the same type of thing. And with the pandemic, again, where we are confined to a space, having the ability to separate our work off from where we're living with our family, to be able to design some spaces that create some of that separation so that it's just not all muddied together all the time. I think we have designed during the pandemic units to give more flexibility, to have that alternative space where you could close it off or slide a barn door or just have it tucked around in an alcove where you can separate work from just your everyday living. So those are some of the things that we've been doing.
Very much like the Asian model, going
Yeah,
back to
exactly.
the Japanese model. Go ahead.
Well, I think multi-use or mixed, multi-use flexible space is really important, but also actually just convertibility, the ability to convert without having to reinvest in exorbitant costs 5 years from now. So can the space, I think a lot of spaces can be a little heavier on FF&E, for instance, is one thing we've talked about at the forefront, knowing that you might need to make that space different in 5 years or 10 years. Hopefully it's 10 years. You know, not having to wildly reinvest to convert a space isn't easily convertible, but I'm interested to hear what the developers have to think about that.
Yeah, let Joyce, please go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think those are great points. In terms of flexibility, I would say we get asked, I don't know how often, but on a fairly regular basis, the comment comes up, I want to create a timeless building that stands the test of time. I have a couple thoughts about that. In a way, that's impossible. We are in a business in this apartment market where it's such a competitive industry right now. There is a lot of product, even though, as we've identified, we do need more housing, but it's so competitive because of the quantity that you have to take a stand, and you have to know exactly who you're designing for, what your demographic is, who you're going to be attracting to rent. And you have to do some things that are a little bit more forward thinking. And then, like the other panelists have been saying, designing that flexibility so it can adapt. There's just no way, in my opinion, anymore to design something today that's going to be 100%, just 100% makes sense and not need to be updated and touched. Even 5 years from now, at the rate of change, things are happening. So I would just encourage all of us to embrace designing with flexibility. FF&E is a great point, but just know that with the rate of change in our world, we are going to have to keep coming back to our buildings and keep tweaking, keep adapting them. But the units are a great point as well. Of course, the age-old discussion of should we build in a desk has come to the forefront again with the pandemic, as we all ripped those out in 10, 15 years ago from some of what we deemed the dated product. But a much better option is that flexibility, that alcove, the FF&E. Don't be afraid to give people solutions that are furniture based, because that is so adaptable and quick to change. So give people a little extra alcove, a little bit extra square footage, take it maybe out of the kitchen in the urban product. We're definitely seeing a downsize there. The suburban product, the unit sizes are massaging a little bit. And then that's really going to be the way forward.
Oh, thank you. It sounds more like the philosophy on restaurants. You got a budget to remodel every 5 to 7 years. This is what it sounds very similar to on that basis.
Yeah.
But I want the developers to comment on this too, because you're putting up the money. And so that's a little bit critical. If we make a mistake, it's like, so what? You make a mistake, it's wow, what? So please talk about that issues also.
Yeah, I think the designers did a really good job talking about this, and we really rely on them and our management teams to tell us, what they're seeing in buildings and how we can repurpose things creatively. And quite frankly, I think, all Class A product needs to check the box. There's certain amenities you just need to make the resident even want to tour your building. But a lot of the solutions, I think, can come from FF&E. And for example, at our 365 project downtown, we had our pool deck that obviously couldn't be used during the midst of the pandemic. And in the winter months, we bought those igloos that you saw every restaurant buying, and we put heat in them, we put tables in them, and people could work from home in a different environment. And that was an FF&E solution, so it wasn't necessarily like redesigning a space, but I think it's just thinking outside the box, and we'll continue to see that.
Thank you.
I can go first if you want, or you go. Okay. I think one of the main keys to that is figuring out layout and how all of your amenities align with each other. So you do have that flexibility. So on the front end, working with the designers to make sure that your layout is properly thinking, where's my fitness center going to be versus my co-working area, how those can maybe switch if some walls need to get torn down to accommodate some future work, telephone booth stations, whatever it is. And I think also looking kind of how you're struck in the back of the bones, I should say, the structural ramifications if you're going to tear down walls or anything like that, trying to almost future proof a little bit, because as you mentioned, a lot of developers do after 7-8 years start looking to remodel areas and go through the full gamut of everything. So having that flexibility at a later date and just kind of planning through some of the things that might trip you up, 7 years down the road is a good way to be proactive.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd add that I think multifamily is following a little bit in the trail of hospitality, and design preferences change quickly, and just like restaurants, hotels have PIPs that they either reflag or rebrand every 7 to 10 years, or they bring it back up to brand standards. And I think we're going to see an increasing evolution towards that in multifamily, and changing the amenities more regularly, and even units, and we're not there yet, but I think that's going to happen. And I also want to touch on stuff other than the amenities. I think parking is something we spend a lot of time thinking about. Is what is the appropriate level of parking today versus what is it going to be in 10 years or 20 years? Because I agree that multifamily, we're not building 200-year assets that are going to be around like churches in Europe, but parking, there is going to be a change in demand there within the lifespan of all the buildings we're working on right now. And so figuring out what is suitable now, what is going to be suitable in 10 years, regardless of whether we hold it or the next owner is holding it, what is that going to look like? Is there going to be car sharing? Is there going to be more use of Uber and other services like that, and electric vehicles, and what is the appropriate amount of EV to put in the parking structures now versus conduit, to allow for installing it at a later date, as well as Wi-Fi and broadband changing to rooftop dishes in the future, and adding conduit and stuff like that. So I think you really have to think about what is the lifespan of this building, and what is going to be different during that lifespan.
What's interesting, that's sort of a common theme, is that we used to design buildings as fixed assets. You design it done, and maybe you paint the units after there's a turnover. Maybe throw on some wallpaper in the common areas and call it good. Given what you're hearing, that philosophy cannot be so much regarded anymore. It's more like how you design these buildings to evolve with the changes in nature of society, uses, costs, and everything else. And so we're on a cusp of not just dealing with what I just call stationary architecture, building these buildings that could be retrofitted, changed to meet a rapidly changing market, which is a big deal, because we, in the apartment industry, we never really looked at that outside of a basic FE budget of putting new carpet in the hallways, changing light fixtures, and not. We may need to go beyond this to keep buildings relevant for a bunch of issues and a bunch of changes in society that have been set forth. So actually, there's a good host of answers that our panelists have really put forth on this. Before I ask the next question, any comments, thoughts from the audience or people online on these comments, or where you see things going? If not, I'll ask one last question, which is going to be the key, which is how is the industry dealt with cost by making units smaller. This is where we did. We made units smaller to try to keep affordability, hence the invention of micro units. The average size of apartments is smaller today than they were 5 years ago. It's 750 used to be a standard. Now we're down to 650, 600 in micros. I just want to ask the panelists, in terms of these rapidly rising costs that are occurring, that may or may not abate, I don't see inflation being necessarily transitory just because of the environment and labor shortage issue. What's the panelist thought on how to keep housing affordable, outside of subsidies, and that in terms of construction technologies, unit size, amenity, parking ratios, all that. So I want to get your minds answering that question, because that's an issue that's going to continually weighing us, so we're going to have to adapt to. So please, anyone wants to jump in on that question.
I'll go real quick, and I'm just going to say, because you should elaborate on this, but how we fabricate things is is a big deal. And so I think I'll leave that to Christian, but we had seen it through prefabrication of balconies and assemblage of wall panels and precasted materials. Christian's going to the next level, so I'll leave that. But also, we're doing a project right now at a TOD site, but we've done this in the downtown market as well, but the idea of shared infrastructure. So not building the parking, but sharing it with someone who uses it during the day, and then it flips to the user who is there sleeping at night, where they can park their car in the same spot and have 100% utilization of the existing structure. That's pretty green. That's pretty sustainable. It's pretty smart. So I think those are a couple of things that I think we can continue to look at.
Yeah, and while I'm thinking about it, I think the shared parking is a really important one on our project right across in Pentagon Park. There's a shared parking structure for the office and future hotel and retail uses that'll use it during the day. And then our residents will utilize it at night. We have some parking, within the structure, but we're supplementing it with that parking garage. And parking is expensive. It's roughly $30,000 per stall, and so that and it doesn't pay for itself in terms of income for the parking. And so if you can reduce parking, it definitely helps the pro forma. And it's really location dependent, and that's why you're seeing so much transit oriented development as well. And so I think parking is low hanging fruit, especially as demand for that will change as people use less cars or less personal vehicles over time. But to speak on modular, we have to fundamentally change the way we build. That's really the only way to deliver more units more cost effectively. And so I think we're seeing it on the coasts, and we generally lag behind by several years, but I think we're going to see much more use of prefabrication and not just volumetric modular, but panelized systems and structural systems and prefabricated kitchens and bathrooms. And so we're just one tool, but I think you're going to see a lot more industrialization building. And we always like to use a car analogy. No one gets shipped a set of parts and builds their car in their garage. It's built on an assembly line, and it's not a perfect analogy, but I think we're moving in that direction. And that's how we have as a society have gotten costs of everything we use in our lives down, is with automation, with manufacturing and industrialization. And so we'll continue to see that in construction.
I can go next. So I would say kind of two things, probably zoning and governing bodies preferences. So to elaborate on Christian's point about the zoning. So a lot of suburbs actually, as you get further out, still require 2-to-1 parking ratios. So getting them to kind of update their code and get to the point where they don't feel that's necessary, because otherwise the developer has to rezone or go through a PUD of some sort to get that parking requirement down, which then can reduce the cost. I think the second point of the governing body's preferences is we've gotten to the standpoint of building all of these luxury apartments that every city council member wants to see a new luxury apartment. They don't want to see the middle income housing and the cheaper housing that would take to build those. I would say that Mike's group has actually done a great job in building high quality assets that are for affordable housing for some of his clients. But I think it's just those thoughts and preferences of seeing those luxury housing and expecting that's going to be what they're going to get to, and basically resetting some of those standards so that we don't have everybody trying to build luxury on top of luxury where it may not make sense in some of these secondary or tertiary communities.
Perfect. Thank you. We've reached the witching hour. You've earned your 5 credits. We'll be staying afterwards. Anyone has questions, please come up. Great panelists, outstanding. Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you very much for attending.